ACW is sponsored by Jabati. Self-care through skincare. Jabati is for everybody. Welcome to host. And today on our episode, we will have Dr. Gary Gabriel, our life science expert. Again, it's always a pleasure to have Dr. Gabriel here to share his knowledge. And let me just get you tuned into what we're going to do today. Now, our topic of discussion is a 3-part series where we will be just addressing COVID-19, the vaccine, building the immune system, and ways to protect yourself from the virus. Now, we will also discuss the effects of COVID-19 in people of color, especially African Americans, in addition to why so many people of color refuse to be vaccinated. So we have a lot to discuss. And we decided to really talk about this subject and split it up in a series because there's so much information, and mainly because what's going on in media and a lot of people misconceptions in reference to the vaccine, the virus itself, and especially within African American community. So we really excited over this conversation. And again, we welcome Dr. Gabriel for being here. Welcome, Dr. Gabriel.
Thank you, Robin. I'm so glad to be here to talk about this important subject. It's really important. You set it up very nicely because COVID-19 is really affecting communities of color in very, very strong ways, and in fact, very disproportionate. The biggest aspect of COVID-19 is the whole aspect of access to healthcare. This is starting to really reveal a lot of the inequities in healthcare. But with that being said, there's some things that I think that we all should know in looking at that we're under a pandemic. I know we have vaccines and everything out, but we're still in a pandemic. And so it's necessary to know what's true, what's fake. And I have to always quote in the words, we're not going to curse on here, but in the words of the Wu-Tang Clan, COVID ain't nothing to mess with. So y'all know the Wu-Tang songs, but we're gonna talk about it from the perspective of why it's nothing to mess with, and what should you be doing to protect you and your family. But again, everything starts with knowledge, and this is where we're going to break it down for you right here.
So first thing first, Dr. Gabriel, let's define what is COVID-19 or the coronavirus.
Well, COVID-19, as it is called, is the coronavirus 2019, and is now called COVID-19 for short, because that's when the virus originated. Now, COVID-19 comes from a family of what's called coronaviruses, and coronaviruses have been around forever. So coronaviruses are really the common cold virus. So when you get a common cold, oftentimes that's due to a different form of the coronavirus. But viruses can mutate. So the way this is all originated, and depending on what you believe, and you have a lot of conspiracy theorists out there, some people believe that it was generated in a lab. And the news reports also say it was generated literally from what's called a zoonotic jump from animals to humans in Wuhan, China. So they believe it started really in a food market, an exotic food market where the virus jumped from animals to humans, and everyone in the Wuhan market got sick. Many of them died. And the virus was transmitted from there to different parts of China, and then it went over into Europe, and then it went from Europe to New York City, and then the virus then spread out from New York City to the rest of the country. And now we have the coronavirus pandemic. So that's what COVID-19 stands for. Coronavirus, corona means crown. So when you see all the TV shows, you look at what the virus looks like, you see these spikes That's the crown. Those are what's called the spike proteins on the virus. That's the part that allows it to infect human cells. So that's what coronavirus is.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that information. Interesting, the information you shared in reference to it's actually comes from a food or intaking it from a exotic type of animal. So that's interesting, the whole evolution of it. Now, how does COVID-19 affect our bodies? What makes it break down our immune system?
Well, like any virus, so let's put it in the context of any virus. Any virus that infects you, like a cold virus or influenza virus, it affects cells. It affects the cells in your respiratory tract, in your lungs. And once it affects those cells, it sets up shop and it makes more viruses and it affects more lung cells. And then it actually impairs those lung cells and you get a shortness of breath. The virus can then transfer itself to other organs. The liver is another part of the body where it really sets up shop. And the virus loves to bind. So if you break your tissues down, so you've got lungs, you've got liver, you got heart, those are all organs. Organs break down to tissue, tissue break down to cells. So think about that reference. So the coronavirus can bind to specific cells in organs and really impair the functioning of those organs. And that's why you can get a whole range of the body dysfunctioning. So once the virus infects, like the heart and the liver, and other aspects of your organs and systems, you can get anywhere from fevers and chills. This is how it manifests itself in your body in terms of how you feel. So you get fevers and chills, cough, you get shortness of breath, you might feel fatigue, muscle body aches, headache, sore throat. You lose a lot of people that have been infected with coronavirus. So they lose a sense of taste and smell. You can have nausea and a lot of vomiting. You can have diarrhea. You can have a lot of congestion and runny nose. And it's interesting, because a lot of times I sit down, if I have a runny nose, first thing I start thinking is corona. You have to look at how persistent. Typically what happens if you get a coronavirus infection, you can see symptoms anywhere between 2 and 14 days, after being infected by the virus. But if those symptoms start to get progressively worse and you start to get more symptoms, you then need to go see a doctor. And in some cases, getting access to healthcare can be a problem. And in a lot of cases, particularly in communities of color, we get up in the morning, we might have some of these symptoms. We say, I got to go to work. I got to earn a living. So this is where what I'm talking about, where the disparity and stuff comes in, where you look at the social needs to live, to kind of shrug off what might be early symptoms of COVID. And so you look at that, and then you look at a lot of times our reluctance to get healthcare, and for healthcare systems to really take us seriously in terms of how we're feeling, the level of pain. We already know that there's disparities on how health systems and physicians see how Black folks perceive pain and discomfort. They will be less sensitive to us pain and discomfort. So I might get symptoms, and if I go to my doctor or go to my health system, and they say, you're all right, just take some aspirin and go home, you'll be okay. That's another aspect of where we're meeting this whole aspect of health disparity and us understanding our own bodies and needs and what that might mean on the progression of a disease like COVID. You have to be really mindful and be an advocate. And I'll say this again, you got to be an advocate for your health. So if you're not feeling well and it's been persisting for some time, and you go into your health system or your provider, your healthcare provider, and they're not taking you seriously, you be adamant and say, hey, I need to find out what's happening with me, and you need to be persistent that it might be COVID. So that's the thing. And then you have a lot of us that don't have insurance. So oftentimes we might have COVID. The first thing that might stop us from even pursuing healthcare is that, wait a minute, I don't have insurance, so I'm not going to go to the doctor. You know what? I'm going to drink some grapefruit juice. I'll ride it out. And we'll come up with all sorts of things, thinking that we can override what might be a detrimental progression as a result of COVID. So I just want to kind of paint some very real life scenarios on what COVID is, how it affects us, and what we should be thinking about if we start to feel any persistent symptoms.
Dr. Gabriel, you covered a lot in your comment, and it really, I'm going to add to a little bit of what you were saying, because it really addresses the next question. And you already kind of covered it, but we can expand on it a little more. And getting back to people of color, why are some of the underlying factors that contribute to why people of color are disappropriately affected by COVID-19? And you did add to it, showing us, socially, why a lot of us are being affected because our lifestyles, having to go to work and just ignoring our health. But I really want to elaborate on that more, because I talk to many different people throughout the day, and I work with a lot of people, and conversations always around people of color, why they are not taking this illness serious. Is it because social, economical, and politically we are being affected the most?
Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing: the media will also. I have two takes on this thing. I'm diametrically opposed to oftentimes how the story is being told on why Black folks might be, or people of color might be, resistant to like taking the vaccine, or from the standpoint of why COVID is affecting the Black community more. And when this thing started, these stories started bubbling up, there was a whole wealth of stories coming out why Black folks are getting more sick with COVID. There even was a lot of stuff that was even downright racist, where folks were like, well, Black folks are, this virus is affecting Black folks more. Half truth. It is affecting Black folks and people of color more. But then you have to look at, again, this is what highlights this social disparity, that many Black folks, many people of color are in service roles. Many Black folks, people of color, have to work in jobs where they interface with a lot of people. I might work in a grocery store where I interface with a lot of people. I might be into delivery where I work with a lot of people. I may work in the restaurant industry. So I'm always having interface and exposure, and also many Black folks or people of color don't have the luxury to work at home. Work has changed. You hear the reports that the world of work has changed, that people are working out of their home offices. That is less the case for people of color. So, and the reasons from that are really more socioeconomic. I look at it in my case, in the scientific world, looking at the low percentages of Black scientists and engineers that exist in the marketplace. So if I'm a scientist and engineer, most likely I'm going to be working out of my office, because that's how my industry is positioned right nowadays. But if I got to get up in the morning and I got to do deliveries, I'm not going to be working out of my home. I gotta feed my family. I got to get out there and mingle and interface with people. So the story started propping up that, it's affecting Black people more. Yes, it is. And let me explain why. So I just explained one reason why. From a socioeconomic standpoint, we are not in the position of having the equity of being in jobs that allow us to stay home more. So that's one reason. Another reason is when you look at many Afro-Americans and people of color that have high incidences of things like hypertension and obesity, those things also contribute very strongly to the sensitization and being high risk for COVID and deepening COVID complications. And so there's a study done. Genetic Engineering News did a study. Well, they reported. They didn't do the study. They reported a study that was done in China, and they looked at the red blood cells from people that had been affected with COVID, and took those red blood cells. And one of the things that they found is that even after people had been infected with COVID, those individuals that had hypertension or had an underlying condition like hypertension or obesity, the red blood cells were more damaged in COVID affected individuals that had hypertension or obesity. Now, why does that even matter? That matters because what they're also discovering is that if you are affected with COVID and you have hypertension, you have obesity, you have diabetes, what they're finding is that months after you have recovered from COVID, and they're trying to understand what's the long-term effects of this virus. And there are long-term effects that's starting to happen. People are having memory loss. There's also people having strokes and heart attacks. They're having higher levels of strokes and heart attacks even after being affected with COVID. And I'm really speaking to people that have hypertension and obesity. If you have hypertension and obesity and you are COVID infected, your health needs to be monitored because they're still trying to understand what's the long-term effects of being affected with COVID. So some of you out there have been affected, and then some of you have survived it. And here's the good news. Most people survive COVID. 70 to 80% of the people that are affected by the COVID virus, they pull through. You know, it's a respiratory, you have a long list of discomforts, but most people pull through. But there are also a number of people that don't. And that's another thing. We need to understand that you can sit there and say, well, I'm going to get infected with COVID and it's not going to affect me. And, it's nothing more than a flu virus and I'll take some aspirin and I'll get through it. And all I have to do is just keep my immune system strong. Here's the thing. Bottom line is that might work for you. That actually might happen for some of you. But for some of you, the bottom line is that your health could get far worse. You can end up in an emergency room, in an ICU, on a respirator, and then die. So my point is, it's a Russian roulette gambling game with your health. You can't outguess what's going to happen as a result of a COVID infection. So the key is, how do you look at strengthening yourself? But even if you're strengthening your immune system does not give you protection against a virus. So there are countless numbers of people that were athletes that had the highest level of immune strength, and they died after being affected with COVID. Dead. So having a great immune system helps, but having a great immune system doesn't give you ultimate protection. You have to rely upon your body system to create what's called antibodies against this virus. And that's what we're going to talk about when we get into the whole vaccine portion of this talk. But I just want to kind of hit some real key strong highlights on one. Why does it affect people of color more often? Like, again, I want to repeat, socioeconomic. Also, there's a fraction of us where there's high health incidences. And then there's a third component, is the ability to have access to health care and to know when we need access, we are free to pursue it. There's no inhibition in stopping us from pursuing health care. So I want to stop right there, Robin. I'm passionate about this, but I just want to get through a lot of the noise and garbage that's out there, and people saying, okay, I don't need to take the virus. I don't need to wear a mask. Guess what? You're putting yourself at risk. And guess what? The virus is contagious. You're putting your family at risk. So I just want to ask everybody, if you don't want to walk around and take the vaccine, or you don't want to wear a mask, just look at your children. And we're going to talk about that in a moment too, because children can carry the virus at 5 to 10 times higher the level of adults. And it's been known that they are strong carriers of the virus, and they can spread the virus to people that are vulnerable. So you can look at your children, you can carry the virus to them, and know that if your children are infected, they can carry your virus to your mama or your papa, or they can carry it to your aunt or your uncle who are at high risk. So look at it as a way of, I can affect and cause a lot of turmoil in my family if I don't understand how the virus works, how my body works, and then how do I need to provide protection.
Wow, that was a lot. Thank you, Dr. Gabriel, for that. And thank you for the clarity and the passion behind it and the realness behind it. I'm sure, I know I received, and you answered a lot of questions in my head. I hope our listeners were able to get a lot of questions answered based on just that topic on coronavirus. Audience, as I mentioned, this is a 3-part series. Thank you for listening to the coronavirus portion. Please join us for our next series, which we'll talk about the vaccine. Again, Dr. Gabriel, thank you very much for coming and setting us straight and bringing the passion and science behind all of this, because again, we all don't really understand. We hear what the media is saying, we hear the narratives around it, the stories around it, but what you did today for me, and I hope for our audience, is that you clarified the importance of taking care of yourself, taking charge of your health, especially in the African American community, and why it's very important that we be very diligent in reference to getting the vaccine, or making sure we're not in that statistics of being obese or having hypertension. And it goes back to, again, wellness. It's interesting, Dr. Gabriel, how everything you're saying constantly goes back to that self-care. And if you are brought into this world and taught in a very young age how to take care of yourself, as an adult, you wouldn't have concerns with obesity and hypertension. It's all about education, and you bring the education. I appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you. Like I said, I'll say it again, not trying to be cute on this, but like, again, I said at the outset, like Wu-Tang Clan said, COVID-19 ain't nothing to mess with.
Right.
It ain't nothing to mess with, y'all. So people really sit down and, look at it. You want to live, you want to have wellness, you want to have vibrancy as you go through this life. And when we go through this series further, I've got this good news, and then there's bad news. The bad news is that, COVID is going to be with us for a long time. And secondly, we get into this whole aspect of climate change and warming of our planet. Let me tell you, even that will have an impact on the number of pathogens that we will have to survive and endure. COVID is not the last. And we're going to talk about that too. COVID is not the last thing we're going to have to endure. There's a whole plethora of other pathogens we haven't seen yet that will come on the scene. So that's why I'm saying it's very important to understand what is a virus, what is your immune system, and then how do you move through society knowing that we have health disparities? How do you become an advocate for your health and the health of your family?
Thank you. Until next time, everyone, As I always say, live life with purpose, intention, and love. Thank you. ACW is presented by Partnerships in Fitness, a fitness and health and wellness consulting group, building strong minds and bodies, and empowering one community at a time. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to our PIFNOLA YouTube channel, and leave questions or comments. You have been listening to the Awareness, Culture, and Wellness Podcast. We thank you for joining us, and we hope that you tune in to our next Wellness Wednesday as we discuss topics that heals the mind, body, and spirit. Until next time, I'm Robin Gabriel-Parson, your ACW podcast host. ACW is sponsored by Jabati. Self-care through skincare. Jabati is for everybody.